Hi, good evening everyone. My name is Maretta from the BDA events team. A very warm welcome to you all. So let me get the speaker up with me tonight. Hi Justin, welcome. How are you?
Good evening. Hi Maretta, thank you. I'm very well. How are you doing?
Oh, very well, thank you. So Justin Leigh is a managing director and founder of Focus for Growth. And tonight he will talk about transforming your practice team leadership by developing a coaching leadership style and increase team engagement, motivation and performance.
So thank you very much everybody for joining us this evening. I really appreciate your time, and thank you to the BDA team for inviting me to run this webinar this evening. Tonight we're going to look at practice team leadership, and it's a subject that's really important to me in the work that I do with my clients. It's also important from my own development journey and recognizing how important leadership is. It's one of those skills that we're very rarely taught in university or in business school even. We tend to look at management more than leadership. So throughout my career, I've discovered a number of different principles that can be really useful when we start to think about leading organizations and leading teams. And this evening, I'd love to share some of those principles with you. And the idea this evening is just to start to stimulate some thinking, to get you to consider certain situations, consider your teams, consider your practice, and just start to understand how you could start to adopt some of these key principles just to help you just to think about your leadership and start to improve performance for yourself as a leader, but also for your teams and the approach you take to better lead your organizations. And as Maretta said at the start, tonight is about really thinking about how we develop this coaching leadership style so that we improve practice team performance. That also has a knock-on effect to engagement, motivation, and of course to your practice results. And as we go through the content this evening, we'll look at some of the key leadership challenges, what gets in the way, what stops people doing a great job of leading a practice team. And then we'll look at some of the principles of coaching, the model that we've developed here at Focus for Growth, and how you can start to apply that in practice to lead your team and coach your team more effectively. And what happens as a result of that is that you start to feel more confidence in your leadership approach. Coaching really does instill greater confidence, not only in you as a leader, but also in your teams over time as well. And we'll talk about why that is as we go through this evening's webinar. And we're looking at GDC Development Outcomes A, B, and D this evening. So a little bit about me. Some of you may already have seen some of my work in dentistry, but my background originally is as a dental technician. So 32 years ago or so, I studied and trained as a dental technician. And at the end of my training, I realized it wasn't the sort of role I wanted to continue at. So I then moved into sales. And I had a sales career in multiple different companies in dentistry. And then I moved into leadership. And my first leadership role was actually outside of dentistry. So I went into a medical devices business and then had a leadership career that saw me leading sales teams and then business teams. Those business teams had kind of clinical functions, technical functions, sales and marketing. So it really gave me that broader perspective of running a business, managing multidisciplinary teams or multifunctional teams as it was in the businesses that I ran. And then in 2017, I came out of the corporate world, set up my own business and started to run this organization, Focus for Growth. I retrained as an executive coach, and I'd already discovered the importance of coaching as a leadership style throughout my leadership career, but then really understood the depth and value that coaching has when I retrained as an executive coach. And in Focus for Growth, what we've found is, I guess, tracking back over my own career, really, we find that as people are in their roles for extended periods of time, we can start to find kind of inadvertent complacency sets in. Start to find your motivation waning, start to find that you're less consistent than you used to be. Performance of yourself or your team might start to go just a little off track. And what we try and help people do, and hopefully you'll get an experience and sense of this evening, we try and get some fundamentals back in place so that people start to feel more engaged, they start to feel as if they can start to perform at a higher level, consistency starts to improve, and then of course results off the back of that. And we do this through various different programs, and I'll talk to you about the way that we do that this evening. And the work we've done, we're really proud team in Focus Growth. We've been recognised a number of times now. This year we were recognised in the SME Awards, Small and Medium Enterprise Awards, both locally in our local district, but also nationally. So this week there is a national awards on Friday evening, tomorrow evening actually, for the SME Awards, and we are finalists at the national level. So we've had some great recognition. Two other achievements that I'm quite proud of. I wrote 2 books, one of which was a sales book, a book for sales professionals. We had a lot of people in dentistry read that book, and then there was a request from dentists to kind of look at the format and the content and make a book or write a book specifically for the dental market, which we did. I launched that this year in March. So this book, if you haven't read it, Inspire, Consult, Sell, really talks about how to take a more consultative approach to your communication with patients and with team members. So it really complements tonight's webinar and our coaching approach. So a lot of experience in our business in dentistry, inside and outside of dentistry actually, but particularly in leadership and in sales development. So a question that I ask a lot of clients that I work with, I ask in a lot of meetings that I attend with larger organizations as well, is in terms of leadership challenges, what are the biggest leadership challenges? And these are the 5 key themes that come up time and time again. So inspiring team confidence and motivation, holding my team accountable to perform. If I'm a leader, how do I hold my team accountable to perform when I'm not, especially when I'm not in the room? Having difficult conversations with team members and how to do that and leave people positive afterwards, rather than that create a negative atmosphere or culture in the business or practice. Dealing with underperformance, people who aren't performing at the level that we believe they are capable of. And then finally, maintaining team performance and momentum. These are 5 key themes that come up. And I'd love for you to just take a moment now to reflect on your own experience as a leader in practice. What are the key themes that come up for you as well? And then what we find is that they come up, this is the order in which they come up. So number 1, so they're the 5 things, but the number 1 challenge is having difficult conversations. So understanding when people's performance isn't on track or behaviors aren't in line with our expectations, how do we have the difficult conversation with somebody? And we'll talk about this as a theme this evening. Second then is how do we hold our team accountable to perform? And I'll share a really simple principle with you this evening. It's going to help you address that challenge. And then thirdly is dealing with underperformance. And it's interesting that in businesses and in practices, we tend to find a disproportionate amount of our time as leaders tends to be addressing underperformance. And it really does, it can be a real distraction for us if we're trying to build a high-performing, growing practice, and then we're dealing with underperformance. It's a real distraction for us and for everyone in the organization. So we'll look at these 3 key challenges because they're the 3 that come up regularly. And then the other asset we use in our business, we've got a number of tools. One of them is called the Coaching Leaders Scorecard. And this is a completely free tool. So you'll see there's a link here on the left-hand side. There's a web address, https, and then coachingleaders.scoreapp.com. And this is a diagnostic tool that asks you 48 questions as a leader. It starts to assess your leadership style and just guide you through some of the key principles as you assess yourself, some of the key principles in developing a more coaching-led approach to your leadership. And it's a really nice tool. It takes between 10 and 15 minutes to complete, and then you'll receive a free PDF personal development report. And from that Coaching Leaders Scorecard, we've had about 1,270 people go through it so far, perhaps a little more as of today. And what we find, that gives us really clear data, some really interesting data. So I'll share some of these results with you as well. So key focus areas, one of the questions or statements is that I follow a proven coaching system that delivers results consistently in terms of my leadership approach. So of all of the people that have gone through it, through our scorecard, only 25% agree, either agree or strongly agree that actually they follow a structured approach to their leadership to be able to deliver results from their team consistently. So it's a real area of professional development for not only dental teams, this is business teams as well. And then the second area is linked to our key challenges. I find myself avoiding challenging situations and conversations with my team. So 60% of people agreeing, and then you've got an additional here, 21% neither agree nor disagree. So actually, if you don't agree nor disagree, you're probably in agreement. So we're up at 81% of people saying I'm avoiding those challenging conversations and situations. I'm going to share some principles with you this evening that will help with that. And then finally, this is interesting. This is part of the approach that we advise clients to take when it comes to leadership, is creating confidential, high challenge and supportive relationship contracts with every member of your team. And you'll see that here, 35% actually agree with that statement. So 65% of people saying, actually, I'm not sure that the relationship contract I have with my team is sufficient, solid, and actually enables me to become the leader that I want to be. So we'll look at these three areas this evening. But rather than jump straight to the solution, what I've found over time, myself personally and with clients, is that if we don't truly understand the challenges, we don't really understand what's going on here, we can fall into the trap time and time again. So we'll just take a moment to look at these three key situations. So having difficult conversations is the number one issue that comes up. Holding our teams accountable to perform, and then dealing with underperformance. And what happens if we don't address this? So having difficult conversations. Lots of practice leaders, I have to admit, early in my leadership career, I struggled to have tough but necessary conversations with my team. And what happens is we put them off. So we allow a small incident or something that should be addressed not to be addressed. And by putting that off, what I found and what my clients find is that performance starts to deteriorate. So a small thing becomes the next small thing, becomes the next small thing. And then over time, we find that underperformance and poor behavior gets tolerated. And if we tolerate it, then values of our organization, values of our team start to get undermined. And none of this is intentional, by the way. This tends to happen more out of neglect than anything else. And of course, if small poor behaviors are tolerated from certain members of the team, it doesn't just affect those members of the team, it impacts the whole team. And then people who are committed, people who are strong performers, start to question, well, why isn't that being dealt with? And I've experienced this on both sides of the equation as a high performer in a team where I'd seen poor behaviors proliferate and wonder, why isn't that being addressed? And I've been a manager in a leadership position, and I had the confidence to address it early in my career. And then I learned some of the principles we'll talk about this evening and was able to address it later on in my career. And we really do have to examine what we tolerate, because what we put up with as leaders in businesses and as high performers in organizations, what we put up with, we end up with, and what we allow will continue and proliferate. So we do have to reevaluate our situation. I hope this evening provides an opportunity for you, if it's appropriate, to just reevaluate where you are right now and start to think about your own sense of self-worth in being able to address some of these more difficult, challenging situations. So next then is about holding our teams accountable to the levels of performance that we believe are right and justified in the business and the practice, but also that we think they are the levels of performance that our teams can achieve. And what happens is that a lot of team members who are performing tend to get left alone. If it's not broken, don't fix it. And so as leaders, we think, oh, well, that person doesn't need help. They're okay. They're just kind of getting on with the job. And what is tempting is to just focus on the poor performers when their performance slips. So we just jump in, pick them up, course correct, move on. And then what happens is they get performance managed, and what happens, their performance and delivery of what we need them to deliver happens in waves. It's good for a while, it drops off, we fix it. It's good for a while, it drops off, we fixed it. And it does happen in these kind of crescending waves of performance. And then long term, what happens because of that approach, high performers tend to plateau in their performance. Poor performers are dipping up and down. And it becomes a cycle, and the culture then gets compromised in our practice or in our organization. And I recognized this early in my career, actually middle of my career as well. A couple of times this happened, and I had to kind of find a different way to address this. And you may be recognizing this in yourself and your own practices this evening. And what breaks this cycle is accountability. Fostering a culture of accountability in our teams through us as leaders. And there are many of the highest performing organizations on the planet. You look at your Microsofts, your Apples, Teslas. One of the things that those organizations do as part of the culture is foster peer accountability. So really trying to get people in our teams to start to own their responsibilities, start to really lean into being accountable to perform. And in the best organizations, that team member holding team member accountable can be really, really valuable. And it's a principle I've tried to implement in the last few businesses that I've led intentionally rather than accidentally. And that's the big thing, is becoming more intentional about the approach that you take. And then challenge number 3 is about underperformance. So how do we deal when people do dip? How do we deal with underperformance? And the challenge is when employees underperform, there tend to be 3 key reasons. So they're not certain of what high performance looks like. So I'm uncertain what it looks like, so I can't deliver it. And if I can't deliver it, then it's very difficult to do. If I don't understand it, it's very difficult to deliver it. Second is engagement. Are they engaged in their work? Do they find it meaningful? Are they enjoying it? Are they inspired? And then third is their level of competence. So actually, am I capable? So there's an uncertainty, there's engagement, and there's level of competence. And usually one of those 3 key reasons. And so what's interesting is that if you've been a high performer, and I was a high performer in different roles that I had in business, I then became a leader. We have this kind of assumption that we know how to lead. And so when I became a leader, I assumed everybody thought like I did, performed like I did, was capable as I was. And it took me some time to take a step back and say, actually, I'm going to have to get really clear on how to explain what high performance looks like and agree it with key members of my team. And it was only then when I took a step back and said clear expectations, training people so that they develop the right skills, and then coaching them, I really had to take a step back and focus on these skills, because they weren't instinctive for me, and they may not be for you today if you haven't had leadership development, formal leadership development. And so then I found it is a trap. I spent far too much time reacting to people who were underperforming. And what I did later in my career, when I realized it was possible, was to have a reset conversation, train and then coach those people, rather than keep jumping in to lift their performance, watch it fall, drift off track again, jump in again. So you may find yourself, or members of your team, this might be resonating for you. And there's this principle in a lot of businesses where they start to think about performance as a bell curve. And there's this kind of assumption and acceptance that we're always going to have 10% of our teams that just don't perform. Then we've got this 70% bell curve in the middle, where we've got below average, average performers, and just above average, and then we have a top 20%. And when you map most organizations, it's surprisingly common how often people will fall into these different brackets, and the bell curve does seem to ring fairly accurate in most organizations. But the consequence for us, if we don't address these issues, is that we end up with this dominant focus on underperformance. We get frustrated as leaders. Our teams get frustrated as well, actually, and the environment becomes reactive and directive. I feel like we're constantly having to direct and I guess point people to answers and situations. And so over time, our motivation, the team's motivation, can decline. We can find that disengagement happens. We can also find we get resistance and defensiveness, and that means we tend to apply more scrutiny to improve performance, and then it becomes this continuing cycle. And really, rather than the focus being on improving underperformance, we should be really starting to think about performance acceleration. And really focusing on high performers to help them feel valued. Otherwise, they can get missed unintentionally. And we want performance and results to become more stable rather than erratic, and stop this disillusionment in our organizations. And of course, right now in dentistry, and it's not just dentistry, but there is, there's a recruitment crisis, there is a retention crisis. And if we don't take the right approach as a leader, we can actually, without realizing it, we can start to accelerate that churn in our practice. And we want to create a better culture that isn't tense and isn't toxic and doesn't cause these issues that we see within organizations where poor performance is prevalent. So really, as a kind of thinking point for us, there's this principle of what they call shifting the performance bell curve. So starting to think about, instead of this normal distribution of performance, what would happen if we could shift the majority of performers in our organizations, in our practices, to actually start to think bigger, to be more inspired and start to perform at a higher level. And as a visual representation, it's quite a nice way to start to think about shifting everybody that's kind of performing at a certain level today and improving and increasing their performance. And one of the founding principles of coaching, if some of you may already have explored coaching as a leadership style and maybe had some work or conducted some work on coaching, there was a couple of moments in my career where I had I guess you'd call them light bulb moments. And the light bulb moment was that commitment from people has to be pulled and drawn from them. It can't be pushed on them, not sustainably. And I learned this lesson probably multiple times, but two distinct times for me. One was when I was in a sales role, and I recognized that actually in order to gain commitment from customers, you have to have a conversation where you are asking questions, drawing information, truly understanding what the customer needs, and then being able to ensure you meet those needs so the customer is prepared to commit. And I learned the same lesson in leadership. After the first time I was in a leadership position, I didn't realize I was struggling, but I was having to jump in and rescue lots of different things that my team were doing. And I found myself giving direction all the time. Yeah, now do this, now do that. And of course, when you give direction, the next time that situation comes up, the person comes back for more direction. And actually recognizing when I had an intervention, a coaching intervention, that the answer is not to give the answer. The answer is to question, not to answer. Right? So commitment is pulled, it's not pushed. In leadership, and if we're trying to influence other people, we draw commitment from people. We don't push it on them, and that's such an important distinction for coaching as a leadership style, but also for being able to influence and persuade other people in the most authentic way possible for us and for them. And the reason this is such a challenge, and I suffered with this early in my career, is that when you look at the management research study by this company Digits, they found that 61% of managers receive no training after a promotion. And it's probably more prevalent than that in dentistry. This is a broad business study. And even those that do receive training upon promotion, 65% of that cohort receive no ongoing management training. So they get trained initially, and then there's no ongoing management or leadership development and training. And it's really important that we get that kind of resource and support for our professional leadership development. And John P. Cotter, I don't know if anyone's read any John P. Cotter, some great books on change management, on leadership development. The real challenge is to combine strong leadership and strong management and use both to balance each other. And what Cotter means by that is, there's this term that we manage tasks and things, but we lead people. And it's a really important reminder. People don't need managing, they need leading. People are able to manage themselves, they need leading and coaching. And that's what we'll start to look at. One of the there's three foundational principles we talk about in Focus for Growth around what underpins high performance. There are foundations for high performance, and I'll share these with you because it'll be useful for your own context, but also in the context of thinking about your team and their performance. When you think about what constitutes high performance, there are three layers. The first layer is psychology. So does someone believe they can succeed? Do they have self-confidence? Do they have self-esteem? And that really is so important, because once someone believes they can succeed, it's only then that they start to develop the right skills. And skill management, that's when we train people, that's when we understand, communication is really important when we're dealing with patients and customers. So communication skills, being able to listen, being able to create space, ask good questions, understand what they're being told, and then deliver, in practice. And then finally, once we have, people who have high self-belief, good self-confidence, and they're starting to develop the right skills, then we can start to systemize. We can show people the right steps in the right order. We make sure that everything's clear and that people feel as if they can follow a structure that enables them to deliver time and time again. But what I've learned over my career, the reason I share this with you is because if sometimes we can find that people aren't performing depending on what their life situation is, what's happening outside of work and the practice. And if we focus on skills where they need training, or we say, well, they're not following the steps, and actually the problem is psychology, there's something that's kind of rocking them, rocking their self-confidence. If we don't help them address that, then it doesn't matter how well trained they are, it doesn't matter how well we define the system and the structure, actually people struggle to perform. So we have to recognize there are these three layers, and we address the right layer depending on the person's situation. And so let's talk about how we address the three challenges we talked about so far. So having difficult conversations. So there's this quote that I really like. So do the difficult things while they are easy, and do the great things while they are small. And recognize that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But it is really about addressing these situations and challenges while they're small, as early in the process as possible. And I have this quote where I say, difficult conversations are only difficult when they happen after the event. Okay, so just take a moment to think about that. A difficult conversation is only difficult when it happens after the event. And what I mean by that is that we have this model called coaching leaders, and I'll just quickly run through the model because it's really important. It'll help you just to kind of think about where you are with difficult conversations with your teams. But we look at the relationship that we have with each member of our team as a leader. It's really important, fundamental kind of pillar to establish the right relationship with our teams. Then we make sure that we have a plan for our practice or our business. And then a first stage of our process is, and you'll see this model is called coach, so it is a mnemonic. So the C is contracting. We're going to talk about that a bit more in a moment. So contracting first, have a contracting and agreement with each member of our team. Then once the contract's in place, we start to set clear objectives. We'll look at this today as well, because this is how we deal with underperformance. So objectives and goals, make sure that we're really clear and our teams are really clear. Then we look at action and observation, making sure the team are doing the right things and we're able to regularly observe them doing those things, because from that position of observation, we're then able to coach them for change. And the coaching can only happen if we follow these first three steps. And then finally, we start to think bigger than that. We help our teams to think about their own future, their contribution to our practice. And this final model, or final stage in the model, is called heroes in the making. Start to elevate people's view of their own performance and potential in the future. And so with that model, we start with contracting in terms of today's session and handling difficult conversations. When we contract with somebody, the idea is that we create this anchor point for our relationship. So we're having a strategic conversation with somebody about what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, about the commitments we make and the commitments they make to us. And when we have this conversation, we get genuine agreement, it becomes this anchor point from which we can return time and time again for any performance-related conversations. Because we agree up front, it creates permission to have these challenging conversations and difficult conversations. And so here's how so what we say is, I'll just animate this slide. What we say is we start with contracting in every conversation with our teams. We state our intent and we set out some ground rules. Then we make our own commitments, but then we make requests of our teams with what are the commitments that we want from them to us. And we're open at those early stages about what might be difficult, what might be difficult for the other person, what might be difficult for us, because nobody really likes having a difficult conversation. But by saying at the start, whilst they don't come easy for anybody, my commitment to you is that as and when I need to have a difficult conversation with you, I commit to you that I'll do it. And I'll give you honest and open feedback. And by agreeing it in advance, by getting genuine agreement in advance, and perhaps with certain people even starting to use examples in a situation like this that may arise, I will address it. In a situation like this that may arise, my commitment to you is I'll address it and give you the feedback. All of a sudden, we open the door to being able to have those difficult conversations because we're talking about them in the future, not in the moment. And so you see the quote about difficult conversations are only difficult after the event. This is why that statement is true, because we future pace through contracting. And really what we're looking for here is a commitment to performance from our teams. And so I have these example contracting notes. These are real from a client that I work with. So number one is to use a coaching leadership style. So to let your team know, I should be using a leadership style in future that is more coaching led. So I'll ask more questions than I'll give answers. It might take you a little longer just to come up with some thoughts and ideas of your own, but it will be better for you and better for the practice. I want us to have an open, honest and relationship. I want you also to be receptive to ideas, and I will be receptive to your ideas. I'd like to see positive behaviours, positive attitudes, and I will look to always deliver the same and be positive and have a positive attitude too. I'd like you to be supportive of the entire team at all times, including me, so that as a team we start to really support each other to grow and develop as best as possible. I'd like to have permission to challenge you and to be challenged by you in a positive and constructive way. I'd like to be able to have difficult conversations when necessary and for us both to be able to move forward positively without that impacting the culture or our environment. And then finally, to welcome feedback from each other as an opportunity for growth, development and improvement. And so you can see that having a conversation, a strategic conversation with someone, using this as a framework can really start to change the way that the dynamic in the relationship and the way that we set expectations. And what we have to do is, as we think about this as a frame of reference, is to remember to focus on the outcome we want. So whenever we have a difficult conversation, we have to then move people in their minds to the performance and behaviours we want to see, not the performance and behaviours that we've seen. So if somebody is behaving in a way that contravenes our contract, then rather than, we have to address that behaviour, but we also have to be really clear on what do we want them to do instead. Because the way the mind works, whatever gets reinforced gets repeated. So if you reinforce bad behavior, you tend to find it repeats. So we have to say, not this, it's that. So instead of, perhaps it was poor performance or poor language, instead, please be courteous, please be kind, please always see the positive in a situation. So we give people a target to aim for, and then they tend to go for that target. And we have this document as part of a toolkit that we use with clients, which helps you prepare to have these contracting conversations. So I hope that really helps you think about difficult conversations, almost taking a step backwards and saying, actually, I need to prepare myself and my teams for this, and then have these contracting conversations because it helps us as we move into the future. So then second is about holding our teams accountable to perform. So really interesting that if you look at the evidence on this, there's a Gallup study that talks about the highest levels of employee engagement. And the number one indicator of engagement is being clear on what's expected of me in my role, in my job. And Hay Research International talks about the manager or leader influencing that engagement of the team by as much as 70%. So, engagement is influenced more by the manager than by the individual. So greater influence on engagement by the manager than the individual. It's really fascinating. So what we think about this second stage in our model, the objectives and goals that we agree with our teams. And we start to think about overarching goals for performance. We start to think about priority results and action areas. We start to think about leading metrics, what are the things that we do to deliver the results we're looking for, and then lagging metrics, the things that we measure that are, are after the team and we have performed. And there's this principle from, there's a great book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And there's this principle in that book called 133, which is one overarching goal, 3 priority streams of activities that deliver the goal, and then 3 activities per stream. And we start to think about our kind of expectations and objective setting in this way. So what's the one thing we're trying to achieve as a team? What are the 3 priority streams of activities that need to deliver that one thing? And then what are the 3 activities per stream? And we start to talk to our teams about this. So 1, 3, 3 really simplifies the way that we think about performance and delivery. And we want to gain agreement and commitment from ourselves and from our teams to what does high performance look like for them. And then really, once we've agreed what this looks like, and I've got an example in a moment, we start to review this with people on a regular basis. And I recommend minimum kind of a monthly conversation, half an hour, just to talk about how you're performing, where are you against the goals that we agreed, just to help people keep on track. Really, really important that we do that on a regular basis, one-to-one with each of our teams. And this is the kind of planning tool that we use. So this would be at a practice level. So you look at setting out your goals. What's the monthly revenue? How many patients on a plan, for example? How many new leads through social media? How many new key treatments? What about patient referrals? Perhaps number of 5-star Google reviews. So we start to capture the key goals for the practice, and then these can cascade down to the team. And then you'll see that we've got these different elements. So priority number 1 might be leading the practice. Priority number 2 might be marketing and patient lead generation. Priority number 3 might be patient experience and referrals. And then I won't go through all of these, but in each of these, you've then got 3 key actions that will be taken to deliver on those 3 priorities, all of which loop back to delivering the goal in the top, that is our primary goal overall. And so you start to see the structure for really setting clear expectations and enabling you to be clear on what does high performance look like, so that you then can help your teams to start to self-correct when it comes to their own performance. So you're not having to manage underperformance. They're starting to do that for themselves through the tools and the approach that you take in your coaching conversations with them about what high performance looks like. And so rather than dealing with underperformance, we start to set people's sights higher around what does high performance look like, and getting clear over those expectations. And again, we have that as a document in our leadership toolkit. If anybody would like, I'll give you a link at the end. If anybody would like to contact me, I'll happily send you a copy of the toolkit. So that's holding our teams accountable to perform, which kind of links to underperformance as well. So holding people accountable to perform can only happen if we and they are clear on what's expected. If they're not clear and we're not clear, it's really difficult to hold people accountable to performance. And then thirdly, even with the right structures in place, we will always find ourselves having to address underperformance. It's part of leadership. And we have to do it, because by not addressing underperformance, we are effectively endorsing underperformance. It's a really important principle to get our minds around. So if we follow the right structure, we follow the right leadership approach, we minimize issues of underperformance. We're contracting, we're setting clear goals, we're spending time with our teams, coaching them. We will minimize underperformance. But there are, in any business, as we saw with the performance bell curve, there are always going to be exceptions. And so there is a way to handle the exceptions. Before we go to the kind of, there's a flow we're going to use. Before we do that, the caveat is that we should always be having regular one-to-one reviews with our direct reports, with people that report to us. And those one-to-ones create the perfect time to review their performance, to give them praise and recognition, and to handle issues of performance. And without those regular one-to-ones to just maintain momentum, motivation, engagement, and course correct, without those one-to-one interventions, if you like, then we'll find performance starts to slip off track. So this is a really important caveat as part of this kind of principle for dealing with poor performance. So how do we deal with poor performance? There's 5 steps. So the first thing is that we have to instigate the discussion about performance. So we tell our team member there's something we need to discuss, it's important. And if we've contracted, then we would link this to our previous conversation about having a difficult conversation with them when we needed to. Next then is we have to, so once we've instigated the discussion, we have to agree on the situation. So we explain to the employee objectively what we're seeing and the impact that has on the practice or the culture or other people in the team. And then we have to ask them what's going on and how do you see it right now? we address it openly. We have to be objective, so try and park any emotional attachment to it, which is difficult in leadership positions because very often, poor behaviours, underperformance has quite a big impact, and it's really easy to get emotional. But as objective as possible, and then ask them what's going on. How do you see it? And they'll explain. And when they explain, what you have to do then, once they've explained, you've explained, you agree on the situation. So this is how it is, okay? So very often that's a shift in perspective. It may be a shift in perspective for both of you. It's certainly a shift in perspective for the team member. And then what you have to do is agree on the resolution. And this is where taking a coaching approach really helps, because we would ask the employee to suggest how they will improve performance and behavior. So it's not the leader's job to improve the team member's performance or behavior. It's the team member's job to improve performance and behavior. And by asking them how they're going to do that, they come up with the ideas. And then once they come up with ideas, you together can agree on the specific changes they will make, and then the support you'll offer to help them make it. But the commitment to make the changes is the team members, not the leaders. And I know that's an obvious thing to say, but very often leaders will pick up the responsibility for a team member's improvement in performance, and that creates an expectation that is burdensome on the manager and isn't as effective as it should be on the team member. And then the next step is to gain commitment. So once we've agreed on the resolution, this is what will happen, this is the changes you'll make, this is the support I'll provide, then it's to gain commitment. So gain commitment to change. And at this stage, depending on the person and the situation, we might have to be clear on the implications. The implications for improving behaviour, so are back on track, our recognition, are the great things that come with high performance, but also the bad. So if the performance doesn't improve, there might be some formal disciplinary procedures that have to be put in place. And you, as a leader, we make our commitment to review and focus on meeting the levels of performance that we and they want. Okay, so that is always the case. People always want to improve performance, so we really want to help them to make a commitment to review it and to focus on what we want, which is better performance, improvement in performance. And then finally, I found this step is the one that's very often missed, is what we call future pace. And that is to start at the end of this conversation, is to start to talk with the team member about the specific future situations where you or they might anticipate issues, and to agree on the proactive measures to address them in advance before they become an issue. And this final step is really important, because this really does gain commitment and kind of leaves the door open for you to be able to pick this up as an issue with them again in future. So it's a bit like returning back to our contracting to say, if this proliferates, if we see this return, my commitment is to handle it with you as soon as possible, so that we keep you on track, we keep your performance high, your engagement at the right level, and get your team members' commitment to do that. And this investment in handling this situation at this level, in this kind of depth, really does help you to correct. It stops the dipping of performance, the up and down, because you're addressing it, and you're addressing it strategically for the long term. So that again is a template in our toolkit where we just kind of map that out. And remember, with our team members, we have to get this commitment, because for anybody, enthusiasm, we'll get people that say, yeah, I'm in, I'm going to improve, but we have to make sure we get that future pace, that future commitment, because enthusiasm has a half-life. It wanes for all of us, in particular for our teams. We just have to make sure that we've got this, this commitment to future performance. It's really important. And I'm just going to take a moment to let you think about your biggest takeaways. So as we come towards the end of our webinar, just think about your own biggest takeaways. What are your key actions that you need to focus on from this workshop? What are the changes that you need to make in your practice to your leadership? And normally at this stage, what happens is people will say, well, this has been great, Justin. It's a great introduction to some of the work you do. What would we have to do next? What could we do next? So I've just got a few slides just to share. If you are interested in going a bit further or learning a little more, then what might that look like? And first of all, kind of think about, in terms of getting leadership, getting the right structure in place. I love this analogy of the runner versus the cyclist. If we are kind of almost pounding the roads and trying to work harder and do more and just kind of deal with situations as they come up, we're always going to find ourselves feeling a little jaded and exhausted, whereas our job is to kind of get on the bike, find the right approach, find the best system, and find something that works for us so that it just, leadership becomes easier, becomes much more effortless for us and for our teams. And hopefully you'll see this model potentially as the bike for you and for your teams. And so we have this Coaching Leaders Academy that we run, which is really useful. I've already talked to you about the scorecard, and I'd love for you to do the scorecard in your own time when you get 10-15 minutes. It will just start to guide your thinking, gives you this personal development report and some recommendations. We have all of this content that I've been through tonight, so it's a full kind of modular structure. We have an academy and an e-learning portal with all of the videos and all of the content that just kind of guides you through each of the different modules and stages. We have that, as you've seen, the toolkit for implementation and capturing your ideas as well. And the way that our academy works, we have quarterly in-person coaching workshops, a full day together with a cohort of around 12 people. We then also supplement that with monthly mastermind web classes, kind of online group coaching conversations. We have a private WhatsApp group just in case anybody picks up specific challenges and wants a little bit of additional support or guidance. And there's this continual evolving content as each of our clients kind of brings new challenges to the conversation. Then we make sure that we address those as we go through the program. So 1 day per quarter in-person workshop, 8 live monthly 90-minute sessions in between. We will be starting a new cohort in January 2023. So if anybody would like to talk to us about this, it's not unique to dentistry. So we have dentists in there, but we also have some business owners and business leaders from other business functions and markets as well, which makes an interesting dynamic. It's really good because we get that kind of cross-fertilization of experience and knowledge. And what we're trying to do is really think about, in terms of our masterminds, create some confidentiality, create a community, help with collaboration across different business units, provide some challenge where perhaps we sometimes need it, and certainly some camaraderie. So the kind of key thing, the key Coaching Leaders Scorecard is completely free. Please feel free to take it. The reminder of the hyperlink there, coachingleaders.scoreapp.com. It takes about 15 minutes 10 to 15 minutes to complete that. I talked about the toolkit, so we've got a great toolkit. If you would like a copy, please just feel free to contact me. And then final couple of things. At Focus Growth, we have this mission to really is about bringing world-class business best practice to our clients, so that we can really inspire and help them to navigate a way to become market leaders, so they make a bigger positive impact in their communities and potentially even the world. And the way that we do that ourselves in Focus for Growth, so we have these 5 values. I won't go through them all, but number 1, it's about trying to be a force for good as a business team. And we do that through this collaboration with the United Nations Global Goals. And if you've heard of these before, there's 17 goals developed by world leaders and business leaders to effectively try and improve life on planet Earth for all of us. And what the United Nations Global Goals Committee advises is that you pick one of the goals that's particularly meaningful for you in your business, and then you become an advocate and a champion for it. So we've chosen goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, a goal that we really believe we can kind of make a difference in and support through the work that we do with our clients. We're also proud members of the 1% Pledge. And in terms of being a force for good, one of the things that I do personally is to lead a men's mental health group called Walk and Talk for Men. And I lead this group in Cambridgeshire. We meet, now we've been running for nearly a couple of years. Now we meet a couple of times a month, and we just provide a safe space for men to walk and talk, so that they are able to get the support that perhaps they're not able to get either from local healthcare services or even from family and friends, because it's not always easy to get that kind of support when you're in a difficult place. And we've kind of become quite an involved and committed member of our local community. We have, as you'll see from this picture here, between 25 and 35 men join us every walk every couple of weeks. It's become a real passion project for me, and I've got 4 ambassadors that now lead the group with me. So we're really trying to make a difference in our local community. And whilst it isn't directly linked to my business, it does actually have a connection with my business, because we talk about psychology and mindset a lot as part of the work we do. So I share that with you, just one, because it's a passion project. I'm always trying to raise awareness of men's mental health and the work that we can do to support and improve our communities. So hopefully that's kind of stimulated a thought in you. I'd love to pose the question to you as well. How will you make a positive impact either in your communities, or you want to think bigger than that in the world? If you'd like to connect with me, feel free to scan this QR code here. Or you can email me on justinleigh@focusgrowth.co.uk, or check out the website and my social links here if you'd like to get in touch. Please do feel free to do so. And we send a weekly inspiring email newsletter to our clients. If you'd like to sign up, then there's a link here where you can sign up to our email newsletter as well. If you take the scorecard, I will sign you up to the newsletter, so you can do either of those in order to get in touch with us, and we'll share all sorts of interesting things that we're doing with our clients. Okay, so that ends the formal content for this evening's webinar. Thank you so much for staying on till the end. I really appreciate it. And Merit will join me now, and we will take some questions and see if we can answer them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Justin. Lots and lots of useful information there. We've had a few questions, so I'll just start straight on those, if that's okay. You mentioned different personality traits earlier, but we've got a question: how do you successfully manage different personality traits when you work within a team, especially when some team members, although they are courteous, you can tell they don't get along, and it creates a bit of an atmosphere?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is, if you explore this principle of coaching leadership, it is really about understanding people. It's about asking questions, listening carefully, and really seeking to understand, each member of your team. And there's this, the age-old quote that says, "Treat people how you would like to be treated." I would say that's completely wrong. You have to treat people how they want to be treated. And if you can bear that in mind, if you can start to foster that as part of the culture, in your practice, in your team, and start to have those individual conversations so that people recognize, what are the standards and the values, what are the commitments we make to each other as a team. And if as a leader, if you're demonstrating high integrity, if you're addressing those situations in the right way, through the right contracting conversation with each member of your team, you will start to see that behavior improve, and people will emulate your example. And that's the thing, we are always role models as leaders, and our teams watch us. They're constantly observing to see what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and we set the tone and the climate. So I would say, you really do have to go right back to fundamentals and think, actually, it's down to me as the leader to set the tone, to set the expectations, to address any of these challenges as they come up as early as possible, catch them as early as possible so they don't proliferate. And if you haven't been doing that, don't beat yourself up about it. Go back to the start and say, right, let's draw a line in the sand. Let's start from here. Start to address them, have the conversation with your teams, and press that. We talk about, pressing the reset button on the culture. That would be my advice.
Okay, excellent. And what are the key elements from tonight that you think dentists can implement in practices straight away, come tomorrow?
We've covered a lot.
Yeah.
So I appreciate we've covered a lot this evening. And I'd love to hear people's key takeaways, and feel free to get in contact with me. So for me, the overarching kind of principle is this commitment to start to take a coaching approach. So instead of being tempted to jump in and just give people direction and all the answers, so when someone says, how do I do this, just say, we'll do that, you find yourself continually repeating that. And so you create a team that's dependent on you. And if you can flip the switch in your mind to think, actually, my role as a leader is to create independence in my team, then actually coaching is the way to do that. So every time someone approaches you for an answer, pause, don't give them the answer, coach them to find the answer themselves. And you will find over quite a short period of time, that just changes the dynamic. People start to think for themselves, they become solutions focused, They start to address their own challenges, and they then come to you for sense checks rather than answers. And if that's the one thing that people take away, I'd say that is really valuable from this evening. So that shift in your thinking and your approach to leadership.
Perfect, a good idea. Fantastic. I think we'll leave it at there. Thank you so much for all that insight, Justin.